I'll do again. Got another one here, but this time we're going over to sunny France. Um, Now we've obviously seen they've been having a lot of issues in France, haven't they? With like teachers getting their heads cut off, suicide bombings, the Notre Dame Cathedral getting set on fire. Now, with regards to that, this article isn't about that, but my opinion on the Notre Dame is that it wasn't an accident, as they tried to claim. There's a lot of churches in France getting burnt down. I think it's at a rate of about one every other day or something like that. Hundreds and hundreds of churches being burnt down, and the general churches. Sorry about that noise. That's if you can hear that, that's a plane flying overhead. I live under a flight path for BAE systems, so I sometimes get Eurofighters going overhead. It's quite nice, to be honest with you. I enjoy watching them. But anyway, yeah. So there is a significant number of churches being set on fire in France. With that in mind, I'm absolutely convinced that Notre Dame was intentionally set on fire by new French people who've come over the Mediterranean, and I believe they've done it as a show of dominance and strength to say who's in charge of that country. But that's my opinion. Obviously, the French government have denied that, I believe, as of the Vatican. I think they're lying, personally. But anyway, on to this. So, Muslim pupils. Before we carry on, please, after I've finished reading this and this video's done, go over to this website. Just give them a bit of traffic. Obviously, we're enjoying this article in this video, going through it together. But it's good to send some traffic their way, as they've done the work of creating this for us to enjoy. So please do always give traffic to these articles. Muslim pupils offended by Renaissance painting of nudes to be disciplined. Staff felt threatened by students' reaction, saying they felt fear for their safety after murders of 2 teachers by jihadist terrorists. Well, I don't think that's an unfounded fear, really. And they also had the Bataclan massacre, they had the Charlie Hebdo massacre, and they had a priest had his head cut off. And it wasn't so long ago that there was a baby in a pram got stabbed up as well, was there? So this isn't unfounded in France. So let's carry on. Muslim pupils who expressed outrage after their teacher presented a Renaissance painting of nude women in class will be disciplined, France's education minister has said. Well, rightly so, I believe. France does need to start asserting its authority on its culture. At the end of the day, you can't tolerate intolerant people, because intolerant people will not tolerate you. So at some point, there does become the immovable object getting hit by the unstoppable force, and one of them has to give, I'm afraid. A French teacher at the multicultural Jacques Cartier College, apologies if I've butchered that pronunciation. If anybody's French is listening to that, I've probably made their ears bleed. That'll probably be garlic sauce coming out your ears though, won't it? Go eat some cheese if you don't like that. Showed students the painting Diana and Action by the Italian artist Giuseppe Cesari. Giuseppe Cesari, I think that's the pronunciation, which portrays a Greek mythology story in which a hunter, Actaeon, I don't know how you pronounce that, sees the goddess Diane and her nymphs bathing. The work, which depicts a naked Diana and 4 female companions, is held at the Louvre Museum in Paris. I'd love to go visit the Louvre. I imagine there's some absolutely beautiful pieces of Renaissance artwork there. Especially with all the madness of all the modern art that we're seeing today. I mean, I use the term art for that very, very loosely. And I know people might say, oh, well, define art to me. What is art? Well, I think it's very simple to define what art is, as the word art is derived from the Latin word arte, which means skill, skillful, skilled. So in order to create something, at the very least, it must require, in my opinion, skill. I also think art must be aesthetically pleasing, which I know is obviously a subjective thing, but as a collective, people can decide. Like we decide what laws should be applied, we can decide as a collective what is aesthetically pleasing to the whole. And unfortunately, minority go suck it if you don't agree with the majority. And also, it needs to be, I think, inspiring in some way as well. So I believe it needs to be difficult to reproduce. So, as an extreme example, the Sistine Chapel, incredibly difficult piece of artwork to produce, never mind reproduce. Aesthetically pleasing and inspiring. That is my 3 tests for what defines art. So you could also put, say, I don't know, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony into that, or to try and play that. It still meets the criteria of art, as it doesn't have to be looked at. It can be listened to, or a poem or anything. The Sophia Venetti, Secretary. Sorry if I butchered your name. Secretary General for the SNES FSU Secondary School Teachers Union said during a French class, a college showed a 17th century painting that showed naked women. Some students averted their gaze, felt offended, said they were shocked. Well, that's fair enough, said Miss Venetete, adding that some also alleged the teacher made racist comments during a class discussion. Did they make a racist comment, or did they make what is a reasonable comment, but they didn't like? Was it a form of objective criticism? Along the lines of, well, you're in France, this is part of European culture. A pupil's parent sent an email to the school director saying that his son was prevented from speaking during the discussion and that he would file a complaint. We know well that methods like that can lead to a tragedy, Miss Venetete told BFMTW News. We saw it in the murder of Samuel Paté. Yeah, he was the school teacher, the school history teacher, I think he was, who showed, I think it was a picture of Mohammed in class for debating reasons, I think it was. Or was that might have been the guy in Yorkshire, actually, who did that. But anyway, teacher was murdered. Well, our college feels threatened and in danger. Well, that's a very fair comment. There is precedent for that. As I believe that the teacher from Yorkshire was probably very close to being murdered as well. And he's still in hiding today. Where's our government on that? Nowhere to be seen. We are so weak on asserting what is our social norms in this country on new citizens. I'm not saying that people shouldn't move to Britain or France, but if you don't like the way that things are done in that country, such as showing a picture of Muhammad, then maybe you shouldn't live in that country. That goes for everybody. It's like a Hindu. If you have Hindus who they worship cows as part, I don't think all Hindus do, but some Hindus at the very least venerate cows. I don't know if it's worship or veneration. I think it's probably actually more like veneration, like they're a holy animal. But if they don't like the fact that we eat beef, I mean, I love a good beef steak, and it offends you that much, leave. Go live in a country which meets your sensibilities. That is a social norm. Same with eating pork in this country. If Jewish people are that offended by me eating pork, they're free to leave at any point. This is a social norm in this country. It's part of our culture. The same in France. So seeing nudes, depictions of women in art is part of the history and culture of the country. Especially with the Renaissance. France had a big part in the cultural Renaissance. Especially with the artwork, a big part of it. We're dealing with vindictive parents who prefer to believe their children than us, they said. Well, it's not even about believing the children over them, it's that they hold as I said in my previous video, it's civilizational differences, so they see their own culture as being needing to be dominant over everybody else's, and there's no negotiating with that, as it's just their ideology. Gabrielle Attal, the education minister, visited the school in person on Monday and later said that a disciplinary procedure would be launched against students who are responsible for this situation and who have also admitted the facts. A team would also be deployed to the school to ensure it adhered to the values of the Republic, he said. You see, and that's another thing that France have. They have a very strong idea of who they are. And I'm not saying we should go as far as them, but they even have a ministry of language. So you can't just go inventing new words like a famous one in the English lexicon was vajazzle getting invented. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that in our language, but the French really know who they are. They are under absolutely no misgivings on who they are, what they're about, what the country's about, etc., etc. This is all basic stuff to them. The only thing that they struggle with is who can be a French person, because to them anybody can just walk into France and be French, and I personally don't agree with that. I think being of somewhere is a lot more than just holding a passport or being born somewhere. Those are rather nebulous, and I believe it's being part of a lineage. Now, I'm not saying people can't be invited into that lineage, but I do think that the group has to, the wider society has to accept that person. And you see that often actually with tribes now. It's like if you go live with, say, I don't know, the Maori or some Zulus or whoever, just pick any random tribe. If you spend enough time with them, when you first turn up, you'll be an outsider. And the more time you spend with them and you do things and you prove yourself to them that you're part of them, that you hold the same values, you're not a danger to them, you actually want to promote the group and the tribe and work in its favour and for the betterment of it, eventually you'll get honorary status within that group and they'll accept you as one of them. But even if you lived with them till your dying day, you will still be seen as an outsider, always. And they will joke about it and you will always be the butt of things. And if somebody has to go out, it's going to be you. Unless you've really, really done something unbelievable for that group of people, you will always be the bottom of the pile. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. It's common sense. It's just basic logic that you secure your own family and your own people first, and then guests and visitors second. Sorry about that. I've still got this chest infection. A team, right, so staff at the Jacques Cartier Middle School in Issou, west of Paris, refused to work on Monday, saying they feared for their safety given the recent murders of 2 teachers by jihadi terrorists. Dominique Bernard was stabbed to death by a Muslim man in his school's playground in the northern town of Arras in October. Again, sorry for the pronunciations. I absolutely know no French whatsoever, beyond like Je m'appelle David and oui. That is like literally the limits of my French. So, I don't even know how to say the French alphabet, how to pronounce the phonics with how the French would do it. So I can't even try and piece the words together in a French manner. In 2020, a civics teacher, Samuel Paté, was stabbed and beheaded by a terrorist in Caflan Saint Honorine, 12 miles from Issou. Issou, again, it's this same area. Very cosmopolitan by the sounds of it. After he showed his pupils a caricature of Muhammad in a class on free speech. There we go, yeah, so I was right before when I said he showed a picture of Muhammad. Which free speech is a very important thing in France, by the way. It's part of the ideology of the Republic. So how can you have people living in a country that values freedom of speech and expression who refuse to allow you to have free speech and free expression and demand that you submit to their view on the world? They'll say you can have free speech on whatever you want apart from what we don't like. Well, that's not free speech, is it then, mate? Everything's up for discussion, I'm afraid. In an email sent to parents on Friday, teachers said they were exercising their right to stay away from classrooms over the particularly difficult situation and an increase in cases of violence as their daily reality. And then we get to subheading deteriorating discipline at the school. So the school's head teacher recently asked the Education Ministry for more staff and resources to deal with deteriorating discipline at the school, saying that fights and death threats and threats of rape had become common among pupils. Yeah, we were getting that in the UK as well. And it tends to always be in these, although not exclusively, but it does tend to be in cosmopolitan areas. We feel we are clearly in danger. And I think this has been accelerated by the BLM riots that happened during COVID lockdowns. I think although we were en route for what we're seeing now, I do believe that the lockdowns massively, massively accelerated a lot of this. And then when governments around the world were allowing BLM people to riot in streets and cause God knows what damage all over the world and didn't once challenge them on any of their insane ideologies, it's created a sort of cultural ideology where there is now whole swathes of minority demographics who feel that they are completely empowered to do whatever they feel and please without consequence because they've been allowed to be. And that's why we're seeing with these... Now, the Palestine protests, either way you want to talk about them or see them, I don't think before lockdown, the police would have allowed them to climb all over our war memorials like they've been doing. And I don't think that they maybe would have done so as openly. Now, there may be one or two idiots, but not on the large scale that they are doing now. But now that we've had the BLM riots in the UK, and we had like the Colston statue dragged down, and we had that idiot who tried to set fire to the cenotaph during that, and was given no punishment whatsoever, like literally desecrating a war memorial, basically a war grave. You know, you got nothing for that. These people are looking at it and go, yeah, Britain's weak. Britain and the West is weak because we literally do not deal with these people at all. Now, personally, him who tried to set fire to the cenotaph, I think he should be pilloried in front of the cenotaph, and he should be flogged with a cat o' nine tails. And I don't mean that ironically. I don't mean that for shock value. I literally mean, and I know I keep saying literally, but I genuinely, hand on my heart, believe that that individual should be flogged with a cat o' nine tails and left there all day. So obviously with a doctor monitoring him, just to make sure he doesn't die from his injuries or from exposure to the elements. But again, if he did die from it, you know what? You brought that upon yourself. Just to anybody who may say, "Oh, well, what if he died from being lashed?" Well, shouldn't have tried to set fire to the cenotaph, should he? Where were we? We feel we are clearly in danger. We are supported by our direct superiors, but not from higher up. This is a real call for help, said one teacher. Last week, a Paris court convicted 6 teenagers over their role in events that led to the beheading of Mr. Paté, who was their teacher at the middle school in Conflans, where he was killed by Abdullah Anzarov, an 18-year-old of Chechen origin. In another side, I mean, what's somebody from Chechnya doing in France? There is absolutely no connection there whatsoever. That's part of the Russian Empire. And for those who don't know, by the way, Russia isn't a single country. It's an empire. It's a collection of smaller satellite states attached to the main body of Russia itself. And Chechnya is one of those subservient nations, which is why they have like their own president. But Vladimir Putin is in effect the emperor. In another sign of school religion tensions, the state this week said it will be withdrawing funds for the country's biggest state-subsidised Muslim high school. In its teaching of Muslim ethics, the Averroes School in Lille was found to be violating French Republican values. I'd be very interested to know what they've actually been doing there. On Tuesday, Jordan Bardella, leader of the hard-right National Rally Party, warned that freedom of expression is under threat in France from an all-conquering political Islam that is imposing on our society, its laws, its way of life and its prohibitions. That's very true. It is very, very true, especially in a lot of the higher population areas as well. The police are tending to abandon those areas and people are being left to their own devices. That's the end of the article, quite a short one. It is interesting to see that we are seeing, I think, a pushback of Europeans starting to reassert themselves again. It definitely needs to happen. We don't want to see a return to the sort of early to mid 20th century style politics, but unfortunately, I mean, I'll only go into it slightly, but what happened in Germany before World War II wasn't an accident. People didn't just vote for that moustache man for no reason. I'm not using his name on YouTube because I don't want to get any sort of strikes or anything, but there was a lot of degeneracy happening in the streets, and Germany was a very rural country at the time, although it had industry, and it was also suffering badly with mass inflation and serious consequences. Basically, a lot of what we're facing at the moment. Now it was a lot worse because there was they did have a lot of transgender issues. During the Weimar Republic, and people have heard about the book burnings that the Nazis did, and they think that they were just burning every book, and they weren't. All the books they were burning were from a very specific university, and that university specialised in transgenderism and trying to normalise adults having relationships with children, and by children I do mean like 5-year-olds having adult relationships with them, if you know what I mean. They were basically nonce universities, and the very first sex change surgeries, what we would classify as them, they were performed in Weimar, Germany. But they were also like sort of red light districts, but they didn't just have adults there; they'd have animals in those red light districts as well, and people were engaging openly in that sort of activity in public areas. And although people might not look at it now, but pornographers were appearing everywhere, like pornographic cinemas and things like that were becoming very rampant. So it was a massive culture shock for the people of Germany, and they just because the mainstream political parties like we're seeing today weren't dealing with those issues. That particular man came along and said, "Look, if you don't care how I deal with it, I'll deal with it." And the Germans voted for him, and he dealt with it. Now, did he deal with it right? No, absolutely not. But the more reason that the supposed adults in the room wouldn't touch those issues with a 10-foot barge pole. So what choice did the average German who saw the country being destroyed have? They didn't have any, and this is the lesson that hasn't been learned, unfortunately. And I'm afraid I do fear that this is the lesson that we're going to end up repeating in our times. Anyway, if you found that interesting or informative, please like, subscribe, and put a comment below. It does help getting these videos out to other people. It's part of the YouTube algorithm for showing videos to other people, and hopefully we can get a nice small community going where we can discuss these things a bit more, and hopefully educate other people on the issues that are happening in our culture. Thank you. Goodbye.